Some warnings aren't meant to be ignored, and some places should never be revisited. Welcome to Reddit Nightmares, where the darkest stories from the internet come to life. If you love eerie tales that send chills down your spine, you're in the right place. Now, turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let's dive into tonight's nightmare. A few weeks ago, my father died suddenly of a heart attack. I was devastated when I got the news. Even though we hadn't spoken in months, as soon as I got the call, it made me value him so much more. My heart filled with regret that I hadn't spent as much time with him as I could have, and that I would never be able to see him again. I would never be able to hug his burly, broad-shouldered frame ever again. It hurt. It was the pain which cuts through you and forms a heavy metal ball in your chest, which at the time feels as if it will never be lifted. After the funeral, I made the long drive from the city to a small town on the edge of the state. Here there was a small cabin that my father had owned. I spent the drive thinking about him. He had only been 64. Even though I had grown up in this town, I couldn't remember it. The cabin I vaguely remembered. I remember it was on the edge of a river which divided the forest in two. I couldn't remember his voice. He spoke so little, and it had been so long since we spoke. The regret was almost too much. When I arrived at the cabin, there was a blue truck parked in the driveway with a man in denim jeans standing next to it. When I got out, he walked over to me and introduced himself as Rick. "Oh yeah," I said awkwardly. I remembered him from the barbecues that we used to host when I was younger. He looked older now, with thin gray line running through his hair and crow's feet forming at the edge of his eyes. "I'm really sorry about your dad," he trailed off. There was an awkward silence. It was apparent that neither of us were good about emotions, so I switched the subject. "The house?" I said. "Yeah. The key is in that lockbox over there. I came to say that the code's 2321. 2321. "Got it, thanks," I said, willing this interaction to be over. "Alright, they'll be on my way. Oh, one more thing. You do remember to stay on this side of the river?" Rick had a serious look on his face now. This last remark brought back a memory I had when I was much younger. I remember playing in lightly wooded area behind the cabin. I remember seeing a wooden bridge which traversed the river and went up to it. I remember still being able to see the cabin from the bridge, so I began to cross it. It was at this point that my father grabbed me from behind and told me never to cross the bridge without him. I remember crying, but not much after that. He was always calm, so when he got angry, it was the scariest thing that younger me could fathom. "Don't worry, I remember," I said. The look on my face clearly convinced Rick, so he nodded his head and left. When I entered the cabin, it was much smaller than I had originally remembered it. It was only one floor and was decorated exactly how you would imagine a single father would decorate such a cabin. There was a big TV and couch occupying the living room, with an old hunting rifle mounted on a wall below a deer head. The kitchen was small but well stocked, and from the window I could see the small wooden bridge that crossed the river. My old bedroom was just as empty as I'd left it. No windows, no soul. His room, which I had never entered before, was bigger than expected. He had a double bed and a large oak wood wardrobe full of hunting jackets and baseball caps. All was as to be expected except for a writing desk in the corner. On this desk there was a ragged-looking leather-bound journal. It immediately caught my eye, so I picked it up and took it to the living room. This is what it contained verbatim. Hunting journal. As a hunter in the Asher Woodlands district, I write this journal to document my observations. So that's what my dad did for a living. I remember him always bringing back dead animals, but we never ate any of them. I never understood why. I guess he sold them to buy food from the general store instead. In this district there are two types of deer that you will encounter: the black-tailed deer, which is common across the United States, and the Asher deer, which is exclusive to our region. It can be identified primarily through its orange-blonde fur. Their deer are an endangered species, so if you encounter one, only observe. Another inhabitant of the Asher district is the dark Remycet arachnid. Many of the locals, however, refer to them as clingers. This is a fungus which grows on dead trees exclusively. It is given its name because if it outgrows the tree it develops on, it will sprout 8 legs and will begin to crawl away in a spider-like manner to find another piece of dead wood to feast on. The fungi are white and furry and are an invasive species, so if you encounter one either of a dead tree or moving across the forest floor, burn, drown or eviscerate them to protect the local wildlife that may try to feed of them. They are slow-moving and are no denser than any other form of moss and are, at the moment, exclusive to the Asher Woodland district. This paragraph caught me well off guard. No way that's real. Spider fungi that crawls along the forest floor? My father had never had a sense of humor, and why would he make this up? I continued reading. One of the most common creatures in the district is the two-tailed Asher fox. As the name implies, it is a typical orange fox but with 2 tails. Despite the name, however, they can be found outside of the Asher district. but they are most often seen within the district. They are friendly and will only attack if threatened. The two tails give them greater agility as well as the ability to cover their tracks as they move. One time my kid saw one of these foxes near our house and asked if we could keep him. As they were friendly enough, I said sure, why not. After throwing him some bread, he would come by every morning and afternoon for food. We call him Filbert. This brought back a flood of memories. I remember Filbert. I swear that one time while holding a piece of toast I got him to sit, but he had stood up by the time Dad had come over. Now I look back on it, I never did wonder why he had two tails. I guess because I was so young and my father never seemed surprised by it, so I wasn't either. That's just how it is as a kid. I wonder what happened to Filbert. It is important to always be prepared when entering the heavily wooded areas of the Asher district. While a compass, a gun, and basic survival supplies are expected, you should also have at least one core memory to cling onto while exploring the depths of the woods. This is because not all threats are physical in the Asher district's deepest areas. There is a myth among the town's old folk that the forest has the power to make a man lose his mind, which can only be fought off by a core happy memory that you possess. This is probably bullshit spouted by those old coffin dodgers to get some attention. That last part was written in pencil below the entry. Another creature exclusive to the Asher Woodland District is the lily vine squid. They only found in the two small lakes within the district. They look like lily pads from the surface, with a flat green head being the only part that protrudes from the water. However, if you were to pull one of these from the water, you would see the squid-like body that lies underneath. They can measure up to 15 feet long, and their tentacles are covered with sharp barbs which they use to catch fish and other creatures unfortunate enough to go too far into the water. They are stationary all day unless disturbed and are few in number. While it's unknown how many there are, as their heads are indistinguishable from the regular lily pads which grow next to them, there's probably about half a dozen in total. They aren't a threat to anything on the shore, and the general rule is that you'll be okay if you don't wade into above your knees. My uncle had a dog named Skipper which he lost to a lily vine squid once. He was inconsolable for days. He threatened to take a can of gasoline and burn them all to hell. We persuaded him not to. I remembered Skipper. He was this hyper-energetic black border collie that got the zoom eyes a lot. Rest in peace, Skipper. I loved how dryly my dad wrote about all of this. I don't think he realized the humor of that final line. As well as wildlife, there are also diseases that are exclusive to the Asher district. However, there is only one that can infect humans. There is no name for this disease, so everyone calls it different things, the most common of which is man flu. This comes from a joke that the women of the town tell that all men are born with this disease. The disease doesn't affect a person physically but mentally. It removes one's ability to feel fear, greatly increases one's tolerance to pain, and dulls certain motions. However, despite this, the infected individual can live a very normal life. One of my closest friends, Rick Whitmore, has had this disease for decades. We found out when one day a clinger fell from a tree on top of him. You would expect a 17-year-old boy to panic at this, but he didn't even flinch. It was this moment that we realized he may be infected. People with this disease are dangerous, not because they would harm you themselves, but because they don't possess the fear of losing you. That is not to say that they see you as worthless, but to say that they cannot fathom the emotion of losing you until you are gone. Rick's father had many health issues before he died, but it never affected Rick while his dad was in the hospital, as he didn't possess the capacity to fear the loss. However, I can attest that when Mr. Whitmore passed on, he was devastated. I can relate to Rick. I wish I had known this when I had met him earlier. He can relate to me more than anyone else in the world right now. I put the book down. This journal seemed impossible, and it was making me too emotional. How did he do it? My dad always seemed so in control of what he was feeling. I wish I was like him. I wish that things between us had ended better. There's so much I wish I could say. I made myself something to eat. I was tired. The drive up here had been so long, and with all the emotion of the day, I needed a break from it all. I slept on the couch that night. I fell asleep instantly. When I awoke, the room was dark. It must be late. I reached for my phone wearily. The time was 4:44. I rolled over onto my back and stared up at the ceiling. Just as I closed my eyes to try and rekindle sleep, there came a faint tapping on the window. It was so quiet at first, I thought I may not have even heard it, but then it came again, slightly louder. I lifted my head slowly. My eyes looked at the living room window, but nothing. Then a bang from the front door. I shot up and backed into a wall. From here I could see most of the cabin. Nothing. Then from both the door and the roof above me, 3 more loud knocks. My heart was racing, my eyes watered. The rifle mounted on the wall was across the room. I should run for it. Just as my feet began to shift, the cabin shook as if all the walls were being pounded against at once. The windows rattled and I dropped to the ground. The banging persisted for a few more moments until all at once it stopped. I sat with my back to the wall until the sun came up. My hands were trembling, Only when sunlight had engulfed the room did I stand up. I went for the gun immediately and checked if it was loaded. It was. I looked around the cabin, nothing was out of place. I peered out the window but saw nothing. I finally built up the courage to step outside and see what had happened. There was no damage to the exterior of the cabin. The wood was still its dark brown color with no scratches or indentations. The same could not be said, however, for my car. The windscreen had been smashed in and the rubber on my front left tire had been torn to shreds. As well as this, there were 2 long claw marks down the side of the passenger side door. I went back inside and locked the door. My immediate thought was to phone Rick or someone to get me out of here. No signal. My eyes caught a landline phone hanging on a wall in the kitchen. I ran over to it and rang the police. Asher County Sheriff's Office. What's your emergency? A woman with a soft voice asked. Hello, I think someone's vandalized my car and I can't get back to town. I'm in my dad's cabin a ways from town. I didn't think that a vandal had done that to my car, but I didn't know what else to say. Okay, are you in the property by the river? She asked. Yes, I replied hopefully. Okay, well, there was a bad storm last night and many of the roads are blocked off. We'll send someone out as soon as we can, but until then stay where you are. Wait, you don't understand, I pleaded. I'm sorry, sir, but there are trees in the road. We are trying to clear as fast as possible. We'll have someone there by the evening. Okay, I gave in. It was 7:56 now. I only had to last the rest of the day. I'd get the officer to give me a ride into town and then I'd stay in a hotel while my car gets fixed. I'm not spending another night here. I considered walking to town. All I had to do was follow the road. But whatever did that to my car is out there. I'm not leaving the cabin until police arrive. I sat in the living room imagining whatever eldritch creature I had encountered last night. I reopened the journal. Asher County is home to another endangered species known as lumber cats. They are long and ferret-like in shape. Their fur is a dark brown with lighter brown specks. They use this to camouflage onto trees. The face is feline and they move incredibly quickly. They tend to feed on birds and other small creatures such as squirrels, but they're harmless to humans. Again, if you encounter one, observe only. One of the more dangerous creatures in the area are known as howlers. They are tall, skinny, and walk on all fours. They are hairless with gray skin, however they are feeble and weak by nature. They are renowned as dangerous because their bite, while weak, is incredibly painful as their teeth are known to come loose and to embed themselves in the flesh of the victim. Removing these teeth can take a doctor hours due to their fine and plentiful nature. Howlers get their name because similarly to parrots they can mimic human voices. Fortunately, however, it is only older howlers that can form coherent sentences, as the younger ones haven't overheard enough human conversation to speak properly. Therefore, all voices that cannot be directly attached to a human body should be treated with great mistrust. At night, the Asher County woodlands is said to be plagued by many demons and dark spirits. This rumor originates from the town's elders, who often tell tall tales about spirits that feed of negative emotions. This section caught my eye. Could I have led some entity here? I continued reading. They are said to originate from a source deep within the woods that leads to hell. I have never encountered any of these in my time as a hunter in Asher County. However, the village elders claim that to dispel one of these spirits, one must let go of what hold them back. How do you let go? There's so much I should have said to him before he died. I was such an idiot for leaving for the city. I should have stayed and been with him. My eyes teared up thinking about this. I sat for a moment reflecting. When this didn't work, I went to the kitchen. I looked out the window and saw the wooden bridge that traversed the river. Would burning it help? I thought to myself. The hours went by and still no sign of the police officer. I considered calling again, but I didn't want to piss off the people coming to help me. The lady said to stay put. I've got the rifle, I've got food, I'll be okay. The sun began to sink below the horizon, and nerves began to set in. I had moved the sofa into a corner and was ready for what the night was going to bring, and sure enough, there came a tapping at the window. I readied my rifle, ready to kill anything that entered the building. When the pounding began, it was deafening. The walls were shaking, sawdust was falling from the ceiling, window panes were rattling, and yet in the midst of all this noise a thought occurred to me. He's gone and there's nothing I can do. But that's okay. It may not have ended how I wanted it to, but that's how life is sometimes. I can't let what happened in the past consume me. I need to make the most of the time I have left and live the life he'd have wanted me to live. I hadn't even noticed that the banging had stopped. I looked around the cabin. It felt bigger now, how I had remembered it. I smiled. It felt weird, I hadn't smiled in a long time. I went to the kitchen and made a cup of coffee. I drank while I waited by the front door. Within an hour, I saw red and blue flashing lights coming up the driveway. I put the gun back where I had found it and stepped outside. After a brief conversation with the police, he drove me back to town. On the drive back, he was talking about some unexpected storm that blew through that stop just as he left the station. I wasn't listening, the world felt a warmer place. That was a few weeks ago. I'm back in the city now where I'm writing this account of what I experienced. The book is next to me on the table, I've kept it to remind me of him. My advice to anyone reading would be to call a loved one, you won't regret it.